The Art of Thinking Clearly by Ralph W. Read by Avicenna. Chapter 1. Why you should visit cemeteries. Survivorship's bias. No matter where rock looks, he seems rock stars. They appear on television, on the front pages of magazines, in concert programs, and outline fan sites. Their songs are unavoidable in the mall, on his playlist, in the gym. The rock stars are everywhere. There are lots of them, and they are successful, motivated by the stories of countless guitar heroes. Rick starts a band. Will he make it big? The probability lies a fraction above zero. Like so many others, he will most likely end up in the graveyard of field musicians. This burial ground houses 10,000 times more musicians than the stages dance. But no journalist is interested in failures with the exception of fallen superstars. This makes the cemetery invisible to outsiders. In a daily life, because triumph is made more visible than failure, you systematically overestimate your chance of succeeding. As an outsider, you, like a Rick, succumb to an illusion, and you mistake how minuscule the probability of success really is. Rick, like so many others, is a victim of survivorship bias. Behind every popular author you can find 100 other writers whose books will never sell. Behind them another 100 who haven't found publishers. Behind them are yet another 100 whose unfinished manuscript gather dust in the drawers. And behind each one of these are 100 people who dream of one day writing a book. You, however, hear of only the successful author, these days many of them self-published, and fail to recognize how unlikely literary success is. The same goes for photographers, entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, architects, Nobel Prize winners, television presenters, and beauty queens. The media is not interested in digging around in the graveyards of the unsuccessful. Nor is this its a job. To elude the survivorship bias, you must do the digging yourself. You will also come across survivorship bias when dealing with money and risk. Imagine that a friend funds a startup, you belong to the circle of potential investors, and you sense a real opportunity. This could be a next Google, maybe you will be lucky, but what is the reality? The most likely scenario is that the company will not even make it off the starting line, and the second most likely outcome is that it will go bankrupt within 3 years. Of the companies that survive these first 3 years, most never grow to more than 10 employees. So should you never put your hard-earned money at risk? Not necessarily, but you should recognize that the survivorship bias is at work and distorting the probability of success like a cut glass. Take the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index. It consists of odd and out survivors. Failed and small business do not enter the stock market, and yet these represent the majority of business venture. A stock index is not indicative of the country's economy. Similarly, the press does not report proportionately on all musicians, and the vast number of books and coaches dealing with success should also make you skeptical. The unsuccessful don't write books or give lectures on their failures. Survivorship bias can become especially pernicious when you become a member of the winning team. Even if your success stems for pure coincidence, and you will discover similarities with other winners and be tempted to mark this as success factor. However, if you ever visit a graveyard of failed individuals and companies, you will realize that its tenants possess many of the same traits that characterize your success. If enough scientists examine a particular phenomenon, a few of these studies will deliver a statistically significant result through pure coincidence. For example, the relationship between red wine consumption and high life expectancy. Such a false studies immediately attain a high degree of popularity and attention. As a result, you will not read about the studies with the boring but correct results. Survivorship bias means this. People systematically overestimate their chance of success, guard against it by frequently visiting the graves of the once promising projects, investments, and careers. It is a sad walk, but one that should clear your mind. Chapter 2. Does hard fart make you smarter? Swimmer's body illusion. As Isaias and trader Nassim Taleb resolved to do something about the stubborn extra pounds he would be carrying, he contemplated taking up various sport. However, joggers seemed scrawny and unhappy, and bodybuilders look proud and stupid, and the tennis players are so upper middle class. Swimmer stuff appealed to him. With their well-built, streamlined bodies, he decided to sign up at his local swimming pool and to train hard twice a week. A short while later, he realized that he had succumbed to an illusion. Professional swimmers don't have perfect bodies because they train extensively, rather, they are good swimmers because of their physics. How their bodies are designed is a factor for selection and not the result of their activities. Similarly, female models advertise cosmetic, and thus many female consumers believe that this product makes you beautiful. But it is not the cosmetic that makes this woman model-like. Quite simply, the models are born attractive, and only for this reason are the candidates for cosmetics advertising. As with the swimmers' bodies, beauty is a factor for selection and not the result. Whenever we confuse selections factor with result, we fall prey to what Taleb calls the swimmer's body illusion. Without this illusion, half of an advertising campaign would not work, but this bias has to do with more than just the pursuit of chiseled cheekbones and chest. For example, Harvard has the reputation of being a top university, and many highly successful people have studied there. Does this mean that Harvard is a good school? We don't know. Perhaps the school is terrible and it simply recruits the brightest students around. I experienced this phenomenon at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. It is said to be one of the top 10 business schools in Europe, but that lesson I received, although not that this was 25 years ago, were mediocre. Nevertheless, many of its graduates were successful. The reason behind this is unknown. Perhaps it was due to the climate in the narrow valley or even the cafeteria food. Most probable, however, is the rigorous selection. All over the world, MBA schools lure candidates with a statistic regarding future income, and a simple calculation is supposed to show that the horrendously high tuition fees pay for themselves after a short period of time, and many prospective students fall for this approach. I'm not implying that the schools doctor the statistic, but still, their statement must not be swallowed wholesale. Why? Because those who pursue an MBA are different from those who do not, and the income gap between these groups stems from a multitude of reasons that have nothing to do with the MBA degree itself. Once you can see the swimmer's body illusion at work, the factor for selection confused with the result. So if you are considering further study, do it for reasons other than a bigger paycheck. When I ask happy people about the secret of their contentment, I often hear answers like, you have to see the glass half full rather than half empty. It is as if these individuals do not realize that they were born happy and now tend to see the positive in everything. They do not realize that cheerfulness, according to many studies, such as those conducted by Harvard's Dan Gilbert, is largely a personality trait that remains constant throughout life, or as social scientists liken and Talleyrand starkly suggests. Trying to be happier is as futile as trying to be taller, and this the swimmer's body illusion is also a self-illusion. When this optimist writes self-help books, the illusion can become treacherous. That's why it's important to give a wide berth to tips and advice from self-help outdoors. For billions of people, These pieces of advice are unlikely to happen because the unhappy don't write self-books about their failures. This fact remains hidden. In conclusion, be wary when you are encouraged to strive for certain things, be it abs of steel, immaculate looks, a higher income, a long life, a particular demeanor of happiness. You might fall prey to the swimmer's body illusions. Before you decide to take the plunge, look in the mirror and be honest about what you see. Chapter 3: Why You See Shapes in the Clothes. Clustering Illusion. In 1957, Swedish opera singer Fredrik Jörgensen brought a tape player to record his vocal. When he listened back to the recording, he heard strange noises throughout, whispers that sounded like supernatural messages. A few years later, he recorded birdsong, and this time he heard the voice of his deceased mother in the background whispering to him, "Fred, my little Fred, can you hear me? It's Mommy." That did it. Jorgensen turned his life around and devoted himself to communicating with the deceased via tape recordings. In 1994, Diane Dicer from Florida also had an otherworldly encounter after biting into a slice of toast and placing it back down on the plate. She noticed the face of the Virgin Mary in it, and immediately she stopped eating and stored the divine message, minus a bite, in a plastic container. In November 2004, she auctioned the still fairly well-preserved snack on eBay, and her daily bread earned her $28,000. In 1978, a woman from New Mexico had a similar experience. Her tortillas black spot resembled Jesus' face, and the press latched on the story, and dozens of people flocked to New Mexico to see the Savior in burrito form. And 2 years earlier, 1976, the orbiter of the Viking spacecraft had photographed a rock formation that from high above looked like a human face, and the face on Mars made headlines around the world. And have you ever seen faces in the clouds or the outlines of animals in the rocks? Of course, this is perfectly normal. The human brain seeks pattern and rules. In fact, it takes it one step further. If it finds no familiar pattern, it simply invents some, and the more diffuse the signal, such as the background noise on the tape, the easier it is to find hidden messages in it. And 25 years after uncovering the face on Mars, the Mars Global Surveyor sent back crisp and clear images of the rock formations. The captivating human face had dissolved into plain old screen. This fruity example makes the clustering illusion seem innocuous. It is not. Consider the financial market, which churns out floods of data every second. Grinning ear to ear, a friend told me that he had discovered a pattern in the sea of data. If you multiply the percentage change of the Dow Jones by the percentage change of the oil price, you get the move of the gold price in 2 days' time. In other words, if share prices and oil climb or fall in unison, gold will rise the day after tomorrow. His theory worked well for a few weeks until he began to speculate with ever larger sums and eventually squandered his saving. He had sensed a pattern when none existed. Yeah, is the sequence random or planned? Psychology professor Thomas Gilovic interviewed hundreds of people for an answer. Most didn't want to believe the sequence was arbitrary. The figure of some law must govern the order of the letters and wrong, explained Gilovic, and pointed to some dice. It is quite possible to roll the same number 4 times in a row, which mystifies many people. Apparently, we have trouble accepting that such an event can take place by chance. During World War II, the Germans bombed London, and among other ammunition, they used V-1 rocket, a kind of self-navigating drone. With each attack, the impact sites were carefully plotted on a map, terrifying Londoners. They thought they had discovered the pattern and developed theories about which part of the city were the safest. However, after the war, statistical analysis confirmed that the distribution was totally random, and today it's clear why. The V-1's navigation system was extremely inaccurate. In conclusion, when it comes to pattern recognition, we are oversensitive. Regain your skepticism. If you think you have discovered a pattern and first consider it pure change. If it seems too good to be true, find a mathematician and have the data tested statistically. And if the crispy part of your pancake starts to look a lot like a Jesus Christ, ask yourself if he really wants to be revealed himself. Why doesn't he do it in the Times Square or on CNN? Chapter 4. If 50 million people say something foolish, it is still foolish. Social proof. You are on your way to a concert. At an intersection, you encounter a group of people all staring at the sky without even thinking about it, and you peer upwards too. Why? Social proof. In the middle of the concert, when the soloist is displaying absolutely mastery, someone begins to clap and suddenly the whole room joins in. You do too. Why? Social proof. After this concert, you go to the coat check to pick up your coat and you watch how the people in front of you place a coin on a plate. Even though officially the service is included in the ticket price. What do? You probably leave a tip as well. Social proof, sometimes truly termed the herd instinct, dictates that individual they feel they are behaving correctly when they act the same as other people. In other words, the more people who follow a certain idea, the better, the truer we deem to the idea to be, and the more people who display a certain behavior, the more appropriate this behavior is judged to be by others. This is of course absurd. And social proof is the evil behind bubbles and stock market panic. It exists in fashion, management technique, hobbies, religion, and diets. It can paralyze whole cultures, and such as when sects commit collective suicide. A similar experiment carried out in the 1950s by legendary psychologist Solomon shows how peer pressure can warp common sense. A subject is shown a line drawn on paper, and next to it three lines numbered 1, 2, 3, one shorter, one longer, and one of the same length as the original one. He or she must indicate which of the three lines correspond to the original one. If the person is alone in the room, he gives the correct answer. Unsurprising because the task is really quite simple. No 5 other people enter the room. They are all actors and which the subject does not know, and one after another they give wrong answers, saying number 1, although it's very clear that number 3 is the correct answer. Then it is the subject's turn again. In 1/3 of cases, he will answer incorrectly to match the other people's responses. Why do we act like this? Well, in the past following, other was a good survival strategy. Suppose that 50,000 years ago you were traveling around the Serengeti with your hunter-gatherer friends, and suddenly they all bolted. And what would you have done? Would you have stayed put, stretching your head and waiting up whether what you were looking at was a lion or something that just looked like a lion but was in fact a harmless animal that could serve as a great protein source? No, you would have sprinted after your friends, and later on when you were safe, you could have reflected on what the lion had actually been and those who acted differently from the group. And I am sure there were some excited the gene pool. We are the direct descendant of those who copy the other behavior, and this pattern is so deeply rooted in us that we still use it today, and even when it offers a survival advantage, which is most of the time, only a few cases come to mind where social proof is of value. For example, if you find yourself hungry in a foreign city, don't know a good restaurant, it makes sense to pick the one that's full of local. In other words, you copy the locals' behavior. Comedy and talk show make use of social proof by inserting canned laughter at strategic spots, inciting the audience to laugh along, and one of the most impressive troubling cases of this phenomenon is the famous speech by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, delivered to a large audience in 1943. As the war went from bad to worse for Germany, he demanded to know, do you want a total war? If necessary, do you want a war more total and radical than anything that we can even imagine today? The crowd roared. If the attendees had been asked individually and anonymously, it is likely that nobody would have consented to this crazy proposal. The advertising industry benefits greatly from our weakness for social proof, and this works well when the situation is unclear, such as deciding among various car makes, cleaning product, beauty product, with no obvious advantages or disadvantages, and where people like you and me appear. So be skeptical whenever a company claims its product is better because it is the most popular. How is a product better simply because it sells the most unit? And remember novelist W. Somerset Maugham's wise word: if 50 million people say something foolish, it is still foolish. Chapter 5: Why You Should Forget the Past. Sunk Cost Fallacy. The film was dire. After an hour, I whispered to my wife, "Come on, let's go home." She replied, "No way, we are not throwing away $30, and that's no reason to stay." I protested. "The money's already gone. This is the sunk cost fallacy at work, a thinking error." She glared at me as if she had just bitten off a piece of lemon. Okay, I sometimes go overboard on the subject. It's often an error called deformation professionally. We have spent the $30 regardless of whether we stay or leave, as so this factor should not play a role in our decision. I said, desperately trying to clarify the situation. Needless to say, I gave in the end and sank back down in my seat. The next day I sat in a marketing meeting. Our advertising campaign had been running on for months and had not met even one of its goal. I was in favor of scrapping it. The advertising manager resisted, saying, "But we have invested so much money in it. If we stop now, it still all have been for nothing." Another victim of the sunk cost fallacy. A friend struggled for years in a troubled relationship. His girlfriend cheated on him time and again. Each time she came back repentant and begged for forgiveness. He explained it to me this way: "I have invested so much energy in the relationship." Another victim of the sunk cost fallacy. A friend struggled for years in troubled relationship. His girlfriend cheated on him time and again. Each time she came back repentant and begged for her forgivenesses, and he explained it to me this way: "I have invested so much energy in the relationship, it would be wrong to throw it away." A classic case of the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is much dangerous when we have invested a lot of time, money, energy, or love in something, and this investment becomes a reason to carry on, even if we are dealing with a lost cause. The more we invest, the greater the sunk costs are, and the greater the urge to continue becomes. Investors frequently fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. Often they base their trading decision on acquisition prices, and "I lost so much money with this stock, I can't sell it now," they say. This is irrational. The acquisition price should play no role. What counts is the stock's future performance. Ironically, the more money a share loses, the more investors tend to stick by it. This irrational behavior is driven by a need for consistency. After all, consistency signifies credibility. We find contradiction abominable. If we decide to cancel a project halfway through, we create a contradiction. We admit that we once thought differently, and carrying on with a meaningless project delays this painful realization and keeps up appearances. Concorde is a prime example of a government deficit project. Even though both parties, Britain and French, had long known that the supersonic aircraft business would never work, they continued to invest enormous sums of money in it, if only to save face. Abandoning the project would have been tantamount to admitting defeat. The sunk cost fallacy is therefore often referred to as the Concorde effect. It leads to costly, even disastrous error of judgment, and the Americans extended their involvement in the Vietnam War because of this. They are thinking, "We have already sacrificed so much for this war, it would be a mistake to give up now. We have come this far. I have read so much of this book already, but I have spent 2 years doing this course." If you recognize any of this thought, patterns, it shows that the sunk cost fallacy is at work in a corner of your brain. Of course, there may be good reason to continue investing in something to finalize it, but beware of doing so for the wrong reasons, such as to justify non-recoverable investment. Rational decision-making requires you to forget about the costs incurred to date. No matter how much you have already invested, only your assessment of the future costs and benefits counts. Chapter 6: Do not accept free drinkings. Reciprocity. Not so long ago, you may have come across displays of the Hiri Krishna's sack floating around in saffron-colored robes as you hurry to catch a flight or a train to your destination. A member of the sect presented you with a small flower and a smile. If you are like most people, you took the flower, if only not to be rude. If you tried to refuse, you would have heard a gentle, "Take this is our gift to you." If you wanted to dispose the flower in the next trash can, you found that there were already a few there, but that was not the end. Just as your bad conscience started to tug at you, another disciple of Krishna approaches you, this time asking for a donation. In many cases, this plea was successful and so pervasive that many airports banned the sack from the premises. Psychologist Robert Cialdini can explain the success of this and other such campaign. He has studied the phenomenon of reciprocity and has established that people have extreme difficulty being another person's debt. Many NGOs and philanthropic organizations use exactly the same technique. First give, then take. Last week, a conservation organization sent me an envelope full of postcards featuring all sorts of idyllic landscapes. The accompanying letter assured me that the postcards were gifts to be kept, whether or not I decided to donate to their organizations. Even though I understood the tactic, it took a little willpower and ruthlessness to throw them in the trash. Unfortunately, this kind of gentle blackmail, you could also call it corruption, is widespread. A supplier of screw invited a potential customer to join him at a big sport game. A month later, it's time to order screws, and desire to not be in the tub so strong that the buyer gives it and places an order with his new friend. It is also an ancient technique. We found reciprocity in all species whose food suppliers are subject to high fluctuation, and suppose you are a hunter-gatherer. One day you are lucky and kill a deer. You can't possibly eat all of it in a day, and refrigerators are still a few centuries away. You decide to share the deer with the group, and which ensures that you will benefit from others' spoils when your haul is less impressive. They believe your bodies serve as your refrigerator. Reciprocity is a very useful survival strategy, a form of risk management. Without it, humanity and countless species of animals would be long extinct. It is at the core of cooperation between people who are not related to each other, and a necessary ingredient for economic growth and wealth creation. There would be no global economy without it, and there would be no economy at all. That's the good side of reciprocity. But there is also an ugly side of reciprocity: retaliation. Revenge breeds counter-revenge, and you soon find yourself in a full-scale war. Justice preached that we should break this cycle by turning the other cheek, which proves very difficult to do. So compelling is the pull of reciprocity even when the stakes are far less high. Several years ago, a couple invited me and my wife to dinner. We had known this couple casually for quite some time, and they were nice, but far from entertaining. We couldn't think of a good excuses to refuse, so we accepted. Things played out exactly as we had imagined. The dinner party was beyond reduced. Nevertheless, we felt obligated to invite them to our home. A few months later, the constraint of reciprocity had now presented us with two wearisome evenings, and lo and behold, a few weeks later, a follow-up invitation from them arrived. I wonder how many dinner parties have been endured in the name of reciprocity, even if the participant would have preferred to drop out of the vicious cycle years ago. In much the same way, if someone approaches you in the supermarket, whether to offer you a taste of wine, a chunk of cheese, or a handful of olives, my best advice is to refuse their offer, unless you want to end up with a refrigerator full of stuff you don't even like. Chapter 7. Beware of the special case. Confirmation bias, Part 1. Jill wants to lose weight. He's like a particular diet and checks his progress on the scales every morning. If he has lost weight, he pats himself on the back and considers the diet a success. If he has gained weight, he writes it off as a normal fluctuation and forgets about it. For months, he lives under the illusion that the diet is working, even though his weight remains constant. Jill is a victim of the confirmation bias, albeit a harmless form of it. The confirmation bias is the mother of all misconceptions. It is the tendency to interpret new information so that it becomes compatible with our existing theories, belief, and conviction. In other words, we filter out any new information that contradicts our existing views. This confirming evidence. This is a dangerous practice. Fact do not chase. They exist because they are ignored, said rather Aldous Huxley. However, we do exactly that. A super investor, Warren Buffett, knows what the human beings the best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact. The confirmation bias is alive and well in the business world. One example, an executive team decided on a new strategy. The team enthusiastically celebrates any sign that the strategy is a success. Everywhere where the executive look, there is plenty of confirming evidence, while indications not to the contrary remain unseen or are quickly dismissed as exceptions or special cases. They have become blind to this confirming evidence. What can you do? If the word exception crops up, break up your ears. Often it hides the prison of this confirming evidence. It pays to listen to Charles Darwin from his youth. He set out systematically to fight the confirmation bias. Whenever observation contradicted his theory, he took them very seriously and noted them down immediately. He knew that the brain active forgets this confirming evidence after a short time. The more correct he judged his theory to be, the more actively he looked for contradiction, and the following experiments show how much effort it takes to question your own theory. A professor presented his student with the number sequence 2, 4, 6. They had to calculate the underlying rule that the professor had written on the back of the sheet of paper, and the students had to provide the next number in the sequence, to which the professor would reply fits the rule or does not fit the rule. The student could guess as many numbers as they wanted, but could try to identify the rule only once, and most students suggested 8 as the next number, and the professor replied fits the rule to be true. They tried 10, 12, and 14. The professor replied each time fits the rule. The student concluded that the rule is to add 2 to the last number. The professor shook his head. That is not the rule. One student tried a different approach. He tested out the number -2, and the professor said, does not fit the rule. 7? He asked. Fits the rule. The student tried all sorts of numbers, -24, 9, -43. Apparently he had an idea, and he was trying to find a flaw with it. Only when he could no longer find a counterexample, the student said, the rule is this. The next number must be higher than the previous one. The professor turned over the sheet of paper, and this was exactly what he would write down. What distinguished the resourceful student from the others? While the majority of students sought merely to confirm their theories, he tried to find a fault with his consciously looking for this confirming evidence. You might think, good for him, but not the end of the world for the others. However, falling for the confirmation bias is not a petty intellectual offense. How it affects our life will be revealed in the next chapter. Chapter 8. Murder Your Darlings. Confirmation Bias Part 2. In the previous chapter, we met the father of all fallacies, the confirmation bias. We are forced to establish belief about the world, our lives, the economy, investments, our careers, and more. We deal mostly in assumption, and the more nebulous these are, the stronger the confirmation bias. Whether you go through life believing that people are inherently good or people are inherently bad, you will find daily proof to support your case. Both parties and the philanthropists and the misanthropes simply filter this confirming evidence to the contrary, and focus instead on the do-gooders and the dictators who support their worldviews. Astrologers and economists operate on the same principle, the utter opposites of folk, that any event can substantiate them. In the coming weeks, you will experience sadness, or in the medium term, the pressure on the dollar will increase. But what is the medium term? What will cause the dollar to depreciate, and depreciation measure against what? Gold, yen, pesos, wheat, residential property in Manhattan, the average price of a hot dog? Religious and philosophical belief represent an excellent breeding ground for the confirmation bias. Here, in soft, spongy terrain, it grows wild and free. For example, worshippers always find it evident for God existence, even though he never shows himself outwardly, except the illiterates in the desert and in isolated mountain villages. It is never to the masses in, say, Frankfurt or New York. Counter-argument are dismissed by the faithful, demonstrating just how powerful the confirmation bias is. No professionals suffer more from the confirmation and bias than business journalists. Often they formulate an easy theory, pat it out with 2 or 3 pieces of evidence, and call it a day. For example, Google is so successful because the company nurtured a culture of creativity once these ideas on paper. The journalist corroborates it by mentioning a few other prosperous companies that foster ingenuity. Rarely does the writer seek out disconfirming evidence, which in this instance would be struggling business that live and breathe creativity, or conversely flourishing firms that are utterly uncreative. And both groups have plenty of members, but the journalist simply ignores them. If he or she were to mention just one, the storyline would be ruined. Self-help and get-rich-quick books are further examples of blinkered storytelling. The shrewd authors collect piles of proof to pump up the most banal of theories, such as meditation is the key to happiness. Any reader seeking this confirming evidence does so in vain, and nowhere in these books do we see people who lead fulfilled life without meditation, or those who, despite meditation, are still sad. The internet is particularly fertile ground for the confirmation bias. To stay informed, we browse news sites and blogs, forgetting that our favorite pages mirror our existing values, be they liberal, conservative, or somewhere in between. And moreover, a lot of sites no tailor contain the personal interest in browsing history, causing new and divergent opinions to vanish from the radar altogether. We inevitably land in communities of like-minded people, further reinforcing our convictions and the confirmation bias. Literary critic Arthur Quiller Koch had a memorable motto, "Murder your darlings." This was his advance to writers who struggle with cutting cherries but redundant sentences. Quiller Koch's appeal is not just for Hasid and Hack, but for all of us who suffer from the deafening silence of assent. To fight against the confirmation bias, try writing down your belief, whether in terms of worldview, investment, marriage, healthcare, diet, career strategies, and set out to find this confirming evidence. Acting beliefs that feel like old friends is hard work, but imperative. Chapter 9. Don't bow to authority. Authority bias. The first book of the Bible explains what happened when we disobey a great authority. We get ejected from paradise. This is also what last celestial authorities would have us believe. Political pundits, scientists, doctors, CEOs, economists, government heads, sport commentators, consultants, and stock market gurus. Authorities pose two main problems to clear thinking. First, their track record are often sobering. There are about 1 million trained economists on the planet, and not one of them could accurately predict the timing of the 2008 financial crisis, let alone how collapse would play out, from the real estate bubbling bursting to credit default swaps collapsing, right through to the full-blown economic crunch. Never has a group of experts failed to so spectacularly. The story from the medical world is much the same. Up until 1900, it was discernibly wiser for a patient to avoid doctor's visits. Too often, the treatment only worsened the illness due to the poor hygiene and folk practices such as bloodletting and physical distancing. Milgram demonstrated the authority bias most clearly in an experiment in 1961. His subjects were instructed to administer ever-increasing electrical shock to a person sitting on the other side of the pane of glass. They were told to start with 15 volts, then 30 volts, 45 volts, and so on, until they reached the maximum, the lethal dose of 450 volts. In reality, no electrical current was actually flowing. Milgram used an actor to play the role of victim, but was charged with administering the shock didn't know that. The results were, well, shocking, as the person in the other room wailed and writhed in pain, and the subject administering the shock wanted to stop. The professor would say, "Keep going, the experiment depends on it." The majority of people continued with the electrocution, and more than half of the participants went all the way up to the maximum voltage out of sheer obedience to authority. Over the past decade, airlines have also learned the dangers of the authority bias, and the old days, the captain was a king. His commands were not to be doubted. If a co-pilot suspected an oversight, he wouldn't have dared to address it out of respect for or fear of his captain. Since this behavior was discovered, nearly every airline has instituted crew resource management (CRM), which coaches pilots and their crew to discuss any reservation they have openly and quickly. In other words, they carefully deprogram the authority bias. CRM has contributed more flight safety in the past 20 years than any technical advances have. Many companies are light years from this sort of foresight, especially at risk of firms with domineering CEOs where employees are likely to keep their lesser's opinion to themselves, much to the detriment of the business. Authorities crave recognition and constantly find ways to reinforce their status. Doctors and researchers sports white coats. Bank directors don suits and ties, kings wear crowns, members of the military wield rank badges. Today, even more symbols and props are used to signal expertise, from appearances on talk shows and on the covers of magazines to book tours and their own Wikipedia entries. Authority change much like a fashion does, and society follows it just as much. In conclusion, whenever you are about to make a decision, think about which authority figures might be exerting an influence on your reasoning, and when you encounter one in the flesh, do your best to challenge him or her. Chapter 10. Leave your supermodel friends at home. Contrast effect. In his book Influence, Robert Cialdini tells the story of two brothers, Sid and Harry, who ran a clothing store in 1930s America. Sid was in charge of sales, and Harry led the tailoring department. Whenever Sid noticed that the customer who stood before the mirror really liked their suits, he became a little hard of hearing. He would call to his brother, "Harry, how much for this suit?" Harry would look up from his cutting table and shout back, "For that beautiful cotton suit, $42. This was a completely inflated price at the time. Sid would pretend he had not understood. "How much?" Harry would yell again, $42. Sid would then turn to his customer and report. He says, $22. At this point, his customer would have quickly put the money on the table, and hastened from the store with the suit before poor Sid noticed his mistake. Maybe you know the following experiment from the school is: take two buckets, fill the first with a lukewarm water and the second with ice water. Dip your right hand into the ice water for 1 minute and then put both hands into lukewarm water. And what do you notice? The lukewarm water fills as it should to the left hand, but piping hot to the right hand. Both of the story epitomes the contrast effect. We judge something to be beautiful, expensive, and or large if we have something ugly, cheap or small in front of us. If we have difficulty with absolute judgments, the contrast effect is a common misconception. You order leather seats for a new car set because compared to the $60,000 price tag on a car, $3,000 seems a pittance. All industry that offer upgrade option exploit this illusion. The contrast effect is at work in other places too. Experiments show that people are willing to walk an extra 10 minutes to save $10 on food, but to some same people wouldn't dream of walking 10 minutes to save $10 on $8,000 suite. An irrational move because 10 minutes is 10 minutes and $10 is $10. Logically, the contrast you should walk back in both cases or not at all. Without the contrast effect, the discounting business would be completely unattainable. A product that has been reduced from $100 to $70 seems better value than a product that has always cost $70. The starting price should play no role. The other day, an investor told me the share is a great value because it's a 50% below the peak price. I shook my head. A share price is never low or high. It is what it is, and the only thing that matters is whether it goes up or down from that point. When we encounter contrast, we react like a bird to a gunshot. We jump up and get moving. Our weak spot, we don't notice small, with gradual changes. A magician can make your watch vanish because when he presses on one part of your body, you don't notice the lighter touch on your wrist as a relief you of your Rolex. Similarly, we fail to notice how our money disappears. It constantly loses its value, but we do not notice because inflation happens over time. If it were imposed on us in the form of a brutal tax, and basically that's what it is, we would be outraged. The contrast effect can ruin your whole life. A charming woman marries a fairly average man, but because her parents were awful people, the ordinary man appears to be a prince. And one final thought. Bombarded by advertisements featuring supermodels, we now perceive beautiful people as only moderately attractive. If you are seeking a partner, never go out in the company of your supermodel friends. People will find you less attractive than you really are. Go alone, or better yet, take two ugly friends.